data. It can be controlled by one-tier authentication and things like that. Procedures are very detailed technical steps on how this would be accomplished in a specific technology. So, for example, how would you achieve that two-tier authentication in Solaris, for example? And a guideline is just some suggestive ideas about how the implementation should happen. So that top-down approach is very helpful because up to this point, there is a lot of, if it is bottom-up, you are being very reactive. There is a problem, you go patch it, but it doesn't get resolved organization-wide. People are not thinking about information security. People are just solving problems that have been identified. But as all of us know, there are many problems that never get identified but still linger. So coming to my next point here, long-term security strategy. A CSO needs to understand what are long-term plans of business. Why is that? I answered that a little bit in my earlier talk, but the reason he needs to understand that is because he needs to align his security objectives with business objectives. He needs to justify that. If I come to you and say, give me $200 because I need it for information security, you guys are not going to give me, right? You guys are going to ask me, why should I? What are you going to do for me? And this is why it helps justify how information security is supporting the business and becoming successful. It helps a CSO prepare a long-term plan for what information security would look like 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. If I know that 10 years down the road I will have a web-based portal, I know that I need to start thinking about it and implementing practices right now to make sure that when my web shopping portal is ready, it is ready in a completely secure fashion. I need to start thinking about it right now. Hence the reason why a CSO needs to understand what the long-term plans of business are. The other, as a part of a strategic, long-term strategic planning, a CSO needs to put a very good risk management process in place. The reason for that is because not all risks can be addressed. And it doesn't make sense to address all risk. Because sometimes the amount of dollars that you can put in to fix a risk might be more than the amount of dollars you will lose if someone were to exploit that risk. And you don't want to do that, obviously, right? You don't want to spend more money on doing something that is going to be more expensive than if someone were to breach that, someone were to take advantage of that security loophole. So, and typically risk assessment process is based on risk-reward theorem. So this is what risk-reward theorem looks like. Vulnerabilities is not equal to exploits. The fact that a weakness exists does not mean that it will be exploited. A threat needs to exist to exploit that weakness. Similarly, for the same reason, threats is not equal to exploit. If a threat exists but there is no vulnerability, a threat cannot lead to exploitation. Vulnerabilities plus threats is not equal to exploits as well, right? Because there might be a very, very insignificant vulnerability that might take an enormous amount of effort to exploit for a threat. And so they might choose not to do it. So the fact that a vulnerability exists and a threat exists does not mean that an exploitation of that will happen. But vulnerabilities plus threats allow exploits. Other points here are self-explanatory, so I won't spend too much time on that, but we can talk about that if you have questions on that. So what is the biggest security risk in most organizations?
Data?
That is definitely a risk, but there is something that is even bigger than that.
Insider threat.
Sorry? Insider, yes, exactly. So not necessarily insider threat, but untrained employees, right? Because most people don't intend to do damage, but a damage happens unintentionally anyways, a lot of times. If you look at the data breaches in last 2 years, about 50% of them happened because someone lost a laptop or someone misplaced a tape drive somewhere or something of that nature. And that's a lack of care on the employee's part, lack of a proper due diligence on employee's part. Hence the reason why the biggest bang for the buck is obtained when you have more awareness of security within your organization, both among end users as well as among your technical population. So here is another example. And the regional computer emergency response team in Army, they did purchase and implement a lot of security technology, but they did not see any significant improvements. And reduction of risk was not achieved. Why? Because people were not taking advantage of those technologies appropriately. They were not aware of what more secure behavior was. And when they went ahead and trained their employees on good security practices, they observed dramatic security improvement. So one of the biggest initiatives, one of the biggest pushes right now is to get your average user trained on policies, standards, and procedure, what is acceptable for the organizational behavior. So for example, a good example would be, and I lost my laptop. This happened to me actually in my yesterday's flight and things like that. I misplaced my laptop at the airport. And so one of the first things that you should do is, you should go ahead and report it immediately, right? So that someone can do an assessment on what information was resident on that laptop and what is the consequences of someone getting an entry into my laptop and seeing the data that is out there. In my case, all of that is encrypted, of course. I wouldn't be manager of information security if I left plain text data on my laptop. But that is one of the first things that people should do. So that's an example of why it is important to train end users on policies, standards, and procedures. So phishing, tailgating, other social engineering. Even now, it is amazing. If you go out there and there are actually companies that specialize in doing social engineering. They will go out there. They will test the average user, or for example, they will walk into a store. They will talk to store manager, pretend that they came from corporate, and try to gain access. And it's amazing that in some cases they might even become successful. So the training is an answer to questions like these. So this is the end user aspect of things, but there is a technology aspect of things as well. I don't think the dissemination of how to code securely is very prevalent in average developer right now. People don't know what do they need to do to encrypt data appropriately in Java, for example, or .NET C# platform that is gaining prominence right now. And that's the other aspect of training and awareness. You need to teach your technical population and make sure that they understand when they're doing their development, they understand how to develop it in the most secure fashion possible, so that come 2 years down the road, someone is looking for an opportunity to gain an entry. They shouldn't be able to exploit something that was left open in the code because of lack of awareness. So in the next section, I'm going to talk about some of the interesting trends in information security and how that is impacting the technological thinking in different organizations. Volume of data on the web. It was, in 2006, it was 250 billion gigabytes. Can someone make a guess on what it is? What is the projected number for 2010? Make a guess. I'll guide you in the right direction. Throw any number. Up. Higher.
1 trillion?
Yes, you are pretty close. So in just in the matter of 4 years, the amount of data will quadruple on the web. And what does that mean for security technology? It means a lot of things, but some are plain common sense things. So think about it. What does that mean for security technology?
A lot more to protect.
A lot more to protect, exactly. So, and correspondingly, you have a lot more data to analyze. So now, before you were looking at something that was smaller in number, but if you apply that principle proportionately, the amount of